I heard the crying for the first time when I was 9. A muffled sob, low and aching, coming from inside the wall where the saints were supposed to sleep in peace. Most old chapels hide secrets of faith, but San Cristóbal hides something even God refused to forgive. A village born in fog, where the church bell never rang right, and where every child since 1841 is baptized before their eyes even open, out of fear of repeating the mistake. The chapel stones are thick, the wood cold, the grass around it always dry, but there's moisture between the bricks near the altar. Something pulses. Something breathes inside, as if time itself refused to accept that the life ended. The elders say the baby was born during Lent, but never received a name, a blessing, or rest. Its tiny purple body was hidden within the walls, and since then every southern wind at dawn carries the sound of weeping. The nuns stopped praying there. The bells were taken down. The altar was sealed. And yet, those who pass by still hear it, and those who hear never forget. Because the crying isn't just pain. It feels like it's asking for something, as if the soul knows it was left behind, but still waits. And I saw it, with my own eyes. The crack in the plaster, the dark stain no one can wash away. I touched it, and I swear on everything holy, the wall was alive. Back then, the map was more silence than road. The Spanish crown had ordered a presence deep inland to stake territory along the cattle routes that crossed mud and solitude. San Cristóbal was born from fear, not faith. The first settlers were deserters, exiled priests, widows of forgotten wars, people who had something to hide. The village was built around a natural well, its water salty but said to cure fevers. Around it, they raised mud houses and a chapel made from the virgin forest. No statues, no bells, just an altar and dread. The chapel floor was loose stone. It smelled of rust and lamp oil. When it rained, water pooled before the altar, reflecting the flicker of candles. Locals said the ground had long been sacred, used by ancient peoples who spoke to the dead. The priest assigned to San Cristóbal, Brother Benicio, wrote in his journal that the land seemed to breathe at night and should never have been chosen for prayer. But it was too late. The cross was planted. The people, desperate for meaning, followed. Masses were brief, funerals even briefer. With no cemetery, bodies were carried away by mule, all but one. San Cristóbal never prospered. Its homes endured out of stubbornness more than skill. But the chapel aged in reverse. Its plaster never cracked. The wood refused to rot. Candles burned slower, as if the air was heavier inside. Some said time moved differently in there. Brother Benicio was suddenly reassigned. No new priest was sent. Just a note from the diocese: preserve the chapel but avoid unnecessary rites. That was 1845. From then on, no one lived within 100 meters of the altar. My grandfather said that in the early years, strange sounds echoed at night. Not weeping yet, but groaning, like wood twisting from the inside. Once, he said, the chapel door opened on its own at midnight, even locked in chains. Inside, everything was soaked. The candles had melted, snuffed out one by one. No one talked about it. What happened inside was handed over to silence. But silence, I later learned, is not peace. It's a locked room, bolted from within. Over time, San Cristóbal vanished from official maps. It no longer appeared in trade routes or census records, but its people didn't want to be found. It was as if everyone knew something had been hidden at the village's heart. Children were forbidden near the chapel. Elders passed by with their eyes down, like honoring an unnamed grave. Still, no one demolished it. There was an unspoken pact. The chapel stays and we keep our distance. That's how generations lived, until one day a woman gave birth. The village's only water still came from the salty well, but that week it was cloudy, metallic. No one drank without boiling. Horses refused to approach. Vultures circled rooftops, though no dead were found. Hens stopped laying eggs. The chapel's candles wouldn't light. The nearest priest refused to visit. All of it happened when she arrived, pregnant, young, alone. No one knew her name, only that she carried what would become San Cristóbal's greatest secret. San Cristóbal's founding and its decline followed an invisible pattern. Every attempt to register the village failed. Documents vanished, photos burned, names got scrambled, as if the town itself didn't want to be remembered, or something there decided what could be known. The chapel stood firm, but the altar began to reek, something between rotting flowers and soaked cloth. Lime didn't help. Incense didn't mask it. Those who cleaned got sick. The hills surrounding the town dried out. Green turned to ash. The nights grew longer. A feeling of constant surveillance settled in, not from outside, but from within the chapel. The altar creaked. Doors groaned, even locked. Oil lamps dimmed in silence. Many stopped praying, some moved away, but someone always stayed. Someone had to guard it. What stayed with me most was a handwritten letter I found in an old chest at my great-grandmother S. house. No date, signed only B. It read, "The chapel wasn't built on faith, but fear. And fear doesn't sanctify, it preserves, like glass, keeping something alive that was meant to rot." I've kept that letter ever since. And every time the wind blows from the south, I hear it, not the groaning, but the crying. The woman arrived in silence. There was something in her eyes the dust of the road couldn't hide. A deep, ancient sorrow mixed with fear. She looked young, but moved like someone who had already buried her hopes. No one knew her name. She asked only for shelter, just a few weeks. She was 8 months pregnant and bleeding irregularly, like time inside her was broken. The elders wanted her gone. But Donna Herminia, a midwife and healer, took pity. No mother should give birth under the sky, she said. So she gave her a room behind her house, right next to the chapel wall. In the shadow of the altar, fate began to breathe. No one saw the father. The woman never spoke of him. Whispers spread. Some said it was a soldier, others a priest. But no one dared say it aloud, not near the chapel. At night, her crying seeped through the walls like wind. It wasn't pain, it was mourning. Windows trembled, chickens flapped without reason. And one night, Herminia ran into the room after hearing a sound, not from the mother, but from the child. Labor began too early, and something was wrong. The baby came out backward, eyes open, no sound. For long, long minutes, complete silence. No breath, no voice. When the baby finally cried, the entire village froze. It was sharp but low, like a flute made of bone. Oil lamps went out, the well bubbled, and the chapel cross creaked alone. Herminia had to cut the cord with a kitchen knife. The umbilical cord wouldn't tear. The mother fainted. The child was wrapped in white cloth and laid at the foot of the altar to be baptized at dawn. But the dawn came, and the baptism didn't. The rope had rotted, though it had been replaced just last month. They tried again, even by hand. Nothing. The air around the bell was thick, hardened. The ritual had to happen, but nothing obeyed. Father Miguel returned with a new chalice. He had brought holy water said to come from Rome itself. But when he opened the vial, the water had no scent, no sparkle, no warmth, just stillness, like forgotten rain in a dead basin. He dipped his fingers to mark the child with the cross, but his hand shook so much the gesture shattered mid-air. "It's not possible," he whispered. The child opened its eyes, eyes that didn't belong to a newborn, eyes that looked back, waiting, wanting something more than water, something no one could give. The priest tried again, his voice low, cautious, as if afraid to wake something, but when he reached the word name, he stopped. "What name shall I use?" he asked. Silence. No one knew. No name had ever been chosen. Herminia tried a few. Miguel, Raphael, Joan. But each time the candle beside the child blew out. 3 names, 3 flames gone. The last time, the sheet beneath the child turned damp, not with water, with blood. Still, the priest went on. He knelt, raised the chalice, but before a single drop could fall, the silver cracked. A sudden sound, a long crack across the cup. The water darkened, thickened, turned grey. It smelled of iron and rot, of something dead, soaking beneath the surface. The priest dropped it, fell to his knees and cried. "This isn't rejection," he said. "It's like he was already baptized in something else." No one understood, but everyone felt it. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. No one tried again. The child remained under Herminia's watch, but even she avoided eye contact. At night, the walls sweated, the mattress soaked without leaks, and prayers began to break. During the Hail Mary, Herminia's voice failed at the same line. "Blessed is the fruit of thy womb." She never finished, as if even prayer stumbled on that child. Some said he cried, others that he laughed. The denied baptism spread like a curse. Couples lost babies. No children were born for 5 years. The next one was baptized far away. No one wanted to risk another mistake. The chapel was locked, the altar covered in black cloth. The well ran dry for 3 days. Chickens laid soft eggs, thin as skin. It was as if nature itself refused to move forward, and the child cried every night. The sound pierced wood, stone, and time. Rumors began that the child wasn't human, that the mother had made a pact or was cursed. Some spoke of interrupted rituals, others of fallen angels. But no one knew, only that the baptism never happened. And without baptism, there was no soul. Without soul, no rest. And without rest, only presence, damp, breathing, growing like mold. Without a name, he was given names of fear, the unblessed, the dry drowned, the one who hears, and the one who cries in the walls. Though the chapel was locked, many swore the air around it was always warm, stifling, alive. One drunken man tried breaking in, mocking the village. He never came home. 2 days later, they found him kneeling in the cattle yard, mouth full of dirt, eyes wide, empty, alive, but gone. Never spoke again, only moaned, shaking, whenever a baby cried nearby. Father Miguel, the only one who tried the baptism, was found months later in an abandoned parish to the south. Writing nonsense on the walls in charcoal, his journal, rescued by a nephew, repeated one phrase for 40 pages. Some souls aren't meant to come back. The church never sent another priest. Officially, San Cristóbal ceased to exist. But the chapel remained, because they said if the walls ever came down, the crying would be free. The child's death was never announced, never confirmed, only felt. That night, the crying stopped. Suddenly, for the first time since birth, silence blanketed San Cristóbal like a heavy curtain. A dry, aching silence that made the ears ring. Herminia woke with a taste of rust in her mouth. She entered the room. The white sheet still covered the body, but the body was cold. Cold like the chapel's stone floor. Cold like well water in July. There were no wounds, no blood, no cause. Just a baby that stopped crying and never opened its eyes again. The body's posture was unsettling. It wasn't lying down, it was seated, facing the chapel wall, hands resting on its knees, as if waiting for something or someone. Herminia tried to move the limbs, but they were stiff, and the skin felt thicker, like wet leather. Still, she called the townsfolk. Slowly they gathered. No one dared touch, no one cried. The morning was quiet, almost relieved, as if everyone knew this wasn't the end, just a shift. Brother Silverio, a wandering monk, came when he heard the news. He entered the chapel and fell silent, kneeled before the wall, prayed for hours. He'd then approached the child and whispered, "His eyes aren't closed, they're turned." He claimed the soul had neither risen nor fallen. It had stayed. And that, he said, was the worst fate. Because what stays behind rots differently. Death brought no peace. Quite the opposite. A smell began to rise from the chapel. But it wasn't death, it was sweet, sickly, like rotting fruit. The windows fogged from inside. At night the sound wasn't crying anymore. It was knocking, dry knocks, like nails against wood. Herminia believed the child was trying to escape its own body, that the spirit had nowhere to go, and until it was baptized, it never would. The body needed burial. But the nearest cemetery was 2 days by mule. No one wanted to carry it, or touch it, or look. So the men met in secret. They voted and decided the body would be sealed inside the chapel wall, bricked in, with salt, with herbs, with prayer. Those who did it never spoke. Some claimed they cried as they bricked. Others said they heard breathing. But all agreed on one thing. When the final brick was laid, they heard a sigh from inside. Herminia never entered the chapel again. She passed with her eyes down, aged 10 years in 2. Every night she lit a candle before the chapel door, a white candle with a child's cloth tied to the base. When asked why, she said, "Because he still hears," and added, "We may deny a name, but we can't deny an ear." The young ones laughed. The old ones said nothing. Years passed. Children said they heard knocking behind the altar wall, always 3 knocks, like asking in or asking out. One woman praying alone felt her veil pulled. Another claimed she saw eyes peering through the cracks in the brick. No one cleaned the altar anymore. Dust piled up, but one patch of floor was always damp, like breathing, warm, held in. Then the crying returned, but softer, slower, more tired, not every night, only on waning moons, always the same hour, always from the wall. It didn't echo, it vibrated, as if the wall itself wept. They tried hanging tapestries, thick plaster, lime. Nothing worked. Eventually they gave up. The wall became part of the fear. No one looked at it, they just passed by. The child's death didn't end a story, it began one. The story of what happens when a soul is forgotten by heaven and ignored by earth. A soul with nowhere to go, only somewhere to stay. San Cristóbal was never the same. Children born after had sad eyes, quiet hands, fear of walls, because everyone knew. Even those who pretended knew the child was dead. But the presence kept growing. The decision was made without words. No one said the child would be buried inside the chapel, but everyone knew. No soul would carry him to the far-off cemetery. No mule would bear the body. It was as if the land itself refused him. And so they agreed. He would stay where he was born, where he died, where no one would ever disturb him. The back wall of the chapel just behind the altar was chosen. Thick, damp, already marked with ancient stains. Some claimed it had been opened before, in another age. A passage. No one asked questions, they simply began. 4 men, 2 young, 2 old. They brought shovels, lime, bricks, salted water, and prayers no one remembered how to finish. They worked at night, not out of shame, but fear. Each hammer strike echoed strangely, as if the wall had been waiting. When the old plaster broke away, a hollow space was revealed. Narrow, deep, like someone had carved it long ago, knowing it would one day hold something small. No one spoke. One man left to fetch the body, wrapped in the same birth sheet. Before placing the body, one suggested they pray. But his voice failed, his throat locked. Another tried singing a psalm, forgot the words. In the end, they stood in silence, and in that silence, they heard something, a sigh, but none could tell if it came from the wall, the child, or themselves. When they laid the small body inside, it fit perfectly. No shifting, no pushing. It settled, as if returning home. They covered the body with herbs, rue, rosemary, and a handful of earth taken from the altar. Then brick by brick they sealed it, not with regular cement. They mixed lime with black hen's blood. Old ritual, old fear. When it was done, the oldest among them placed his hand on the new wall and whispered, "Dawn to look back." And they didn't. They left the chapel in silence, and by morning, the night had been erased from memory. But not entirely. A woman claimed she saw mist rising from the chapel roof, slow, thick, like smoke from a snuffed-out candle. And the next day they all noticed something. The new wall. Others, sour milk. A visiting priest suggested it was old moisture, but when he touched the wall, he pulled back. "It has a heartbeat," he whispered, "weak but steady. Not outside, inside." He never returned. The diocese sent a single message: remain silent. Silence is also prayer. Over time, the wall became part of the ritual. No one spoke of it, but everyone respected it. Some women left dried flowers near its base, others tied white ribbons, offering without prayer. It wasn't worship, it was memory and fear. They said that in deep silence, if you listened carefully, you could hear what was never spoken. In dreams, some heard a child's voice murmuring nonsense. Others woke with wet eyes. The wall never slept. During a brief restoration, a worker tried leaning a ladder on that wall. It fell 3 times. On the 4th he climbed, but when his body touched the plaster, he felt skin. He didn't return the next day, told his wife, "Whatever's inside knows it's trapped." The work was abandoned, the wall untouched. Some swore it was growing, closer to the altar than before, maybe illusion, but everyone knew that wall held something that should never breathe. Someone once suggested removing the body. "Give him a proper grave," they said. But no one volunteered. One man dug a pit near the chapel, but by morning it was filled with water, and from within came a sound, a soft cry. He sealed it with his bare hands, never returned. The wall remained, damp, marked, quiet. But some nights the sound was louder, not crying, a murmur, a sound almost like words, as if the child was finally learning to speak. The first to speak was a boy, 7 years old. His name was Bento. He was playing with pebbles near the chapel one afternoon, while the adults worked the fields. He sat close to the wall, and heard 3 knocks. Then a sigh, and then a soft cry. "Like when you get lost and call your mom," he said. He told his grandmother, who slapped him and told him never to repeat it. But that night, she lit a white candle at the chapel's door, without saying why. The second was a man named Alvaro, a reclusive ex-soldier. He never entered the chapel, but one cold morning he walked past it. He claimed to hear the rattle of a toy from inside. Then, knowing behind that wall wasn't just a corpse, but stalled time, wet time, like a womb that never completed its labor. That crying wasn't from pain, it was from staying, as if more than rest he wanted to be remembered. An old blind man, who'd never heard the story, arrived with his nephew, entered the chapel by mistake, stood at the altar for minutes, then turned to the boy and said, "There's a child here." The boy tried to explain. The old man interrupted, "Not alive, but crying, not with sound, with space," and then whispered, "This place has ears. It listens inside you." He cried, though he never saw the wall, because sometimes you must be blind to truly hear. For nearly 20 years, the diocese ignored the rumors. San Cristóbal was considered a closed case, a forgotten village, irrelevant, handed over to superstition. But something shifted in 1862. A new bishop took over the region, Dom Lucio Moreira. Strict, zealous, a former missionary among indigenous peoples. When he heard whispers of a child buried alive inside a wall, he acted, sent letters, demanded records, requested reports, but nothing existed. So he came in person, with 3 priests, 2 novices, and a box of exorcism tools. Upon entering the chapel, Dom Lucio said he could smell the error. Literally, a sour, damp odor that seeped through holy garments. He ordered the altar cleaned, the floor scraped, and the wall examined. Locals refused to help, so the priests took over, wearing gloves and makeshift masks. But one, touching the wall barehanded, collapsed, eyes rolled back. Whispering, "He heard me." He was taken home, never led mass again. Still, the bishop pressed on. "Evil must be faced," he declared. The rite was set for 3 a.m. Candles were lit. They extinguished themselves every 10 minutes. The bells rang, forced, but rang. The sound deep, like they were filled with water. The bishop prayed in Latin, flung holy water and chanted with force. With every prayer, the wall darkened, as if absorbing the rite like dry earth drinks blood. At the 3rd mention of Christ's name, a bang from within the wall, just one. Then, silence. The bishop stepped back. For the first time, he hesitated. He ended the rite early, gathered his things, ordered the chapel locked. Before leaving, he hung a white linen cloth before the wall, inscribed in Latin, "Non perturbare somnum infantem." Do not disturb the child's sleep. The village understood. Even the church was afraid. What should have been an exorcism became a warning. The linen was found torn days later, and beneath it, red stains ran from the base of the wall, smelling of iron and milk. No official statements followed, but sealed documents began to circulate. The church archives referenced a latent entity on consecrated ground within a 19th century peripheral chapel at risk of spontaneous ritual activation. No name, only coordinates. The chapel was listed as closed for structural instability, but locals knew it was a different structure cracking, the one between worlds. More attempts followed. A Benedictine monk was sent. Brother Afonso arrived with metal instruments, ancient prayers, sealed scrolls, spent 3 days in the chapel. On the 4th, he vanished, never seen leaving. His folded robes were found at the altar. On top of them, a child's cloth stained with a small handprint. The church took everything. No explanation. He fulfilled his mission, they said. No one came after that. The case buried, but the crying remained. Eventually, local priests were told to avoid the village entirely. San Cristóbal vanished from public prayers, as if it had never existed. But every time it was omitted, something happened. Candles lit by themselves, crucifixes fell, communion hosts molded in sealed boxes. It was as if the crying hated being forgotten. The more it was silenced, the louder it became. It didn't want to be heard. It wanted to exist. A retired exorcist, Father Eugenio, visited on his own, old, independent. He stayed one night, wrote a long letter, never published, but one line survived among seminarians. "This is not possession, nor legend. It's a mistake, a gap between rites, a soul that fell between what is sacred and what was forgotten. The baptism was denied, that created an echo, and the echo became a voice." The chapel was sealed with iron bars, welded shut, but no one touched the wall. The cracks remained, and through them still came sound, more articulate, more rhythmic, as if what lived inside was learning, listening, understanding, and faith, once used to expel the crying, now simply walked around it. Because even faith knows when to step aside. The church's final attempt was its quietest. A nameless seminarian was sent. No collar, just a backpack. He was to pray, record, report. After 2 days, he vanished. They found his bag in the woods, torn pages, unfinished prayers, and one sheet in childish handwriting, "I can pray too." That was the last line. After that, nothing. No more priests. And for the church, San Cristóbal never happened. Over time, the chapel stopped being sacred. It became a place of what mustn't be named. Locals no longer called it the chapel, just there, or gestured toward it without pointing. Children learned early that the altar wall was not just a wall. It was an ear, a mouth, a memory. Slowly, the crying became part of the culture, background noise, a thread stitched through the village's days and nights. They said if the crying was faint, someone nearby would die. If it was close, someone was about to be born. But when the sound vanished completely, something worse was coming. In San Cristóbal, silence never meant peace. It meant something was listening without revealing itself. When the crying stopped, villagers grew uneasy. Doors were locked, candles lit, bread and water placed by the bed. Old habits, quiet armor. Some families created rituals. On a child's birthday, parents left a gift at the chapel door, a worn toy, a piece of cake, a colored candle, in silence. It was thanks, not to celebrate, but to acknowledge that their children were still on this side of the wall. It wasn't charity. It was a pact. Every child grew up knowing respect was owed to the one who had no name, no party, no blessing, and they knew he was always listening. A local language emerged, a vocabulary of fear. When a baby cried too long, people said, "He cries like the one inside." If someone grew too quiet, he's heard the nameless. Cruel people were said to have lost their hearing, and when someone dreamed of a baby, no one asked questions. Just silence, tea, and the sign of the cross. Dreaming of him meant warning or debt. The wall became a site for promises. Some slipped paper notes beneath the chapel door. Others tied ribbons to nearby trees. The one closest to the wall was called the listening tree. A twisted oak, its bark marked with what looked like hands pressed flat. They said that's how he heard best, through the tree, and its leaves never rustled in the wind, silent, like his weeping. A popular TV show filmed inside the chapel. Drones, thermals, crucifixes, EMF meters. At the first take, the village power grid glitched. Lights flickered, water stopped, animals panicked. The host, upon touching the wall, collapsed. 3 months off psychiatric care. In the footage, just before fainting, he says, "Heshewed me the baptism." Despite warnings, their legend went viral online. Short videos, conspiracy theories, mystery channels. In 2011, a group of YouTubers entered the chapel secretly. They live streamed for 42 minutes. Audio glitched, but clear in some parts, the sound of a pacifier being pulled, and a faint laugh. The stream was deleted. One of them vanished online. His final blog post read, "Some sounds are older than language, and this one wants to speak like chaos." In 2017, a Spanish researcher, Dr. Irina Calderón, expert in historical acoustic phenomena, arrived with a mobile lab. She studied the chapel for 3 days, installed sensors, spectrometers, underground mix. In a report she wrote, "There's SAF frequency emerging from the wall, repeating in patterns similar to human vocalizations. What disturbs me isn't the origin, it's their response." She was suspended for emotional fraud. Now reclusive in Andalusia, her personal website shows an image, the wall and the words "still crying." Tourists became a local threat. They arrived uninvited, curious, recording but never left the same. Some returned mute, others sleepless. One couple disappeared for 5 days, found in a cave dressed in white, crosses drawn on their chests in bleed blood. They claimed they were preparing the baptism, remembered nothing. The chapel was barricaded again, but every week someone tries to break in. The crying calls them. Oral history researchers came next. recorded local testimonies, but apeshad gaps, whole sections missing. When transcribing, they reported strange sounds, toys, breathing, and unwhispered word. Mom. But it was always their searcher's mother's name, even when locals had never heard it before. A psychology study at UFBA analyzed the village's dreams. Over 70% dreamed of a child asking to be born again. All dreams ended the same: a whisper from a damp wall, a small hand, a door slightly open, and the sound of a candle going out. The study was buried unpublished, but its authors claim the village's sun-conscious mind hosts a presence never processed. In 2022, a skeptical archaeologist, Dr. Mauro Saldanha, tried to end the myth, wanted to prove there was nothing in the wall, was denied permission, tried anyway. With a small crew, he began chipping at the wall. At 12:47 p.m., he stopped, said he heard something, placed his art of the plaster, stood silent, then turned pale, and said, "He heard me first." Since then, Dr. Mora hasn't spoken, but every month, he sends flowers to the chapel. Some stories exist to be remembered, others to remind us of what we tried to forget. The nameless child, sealed inside the wall of a forgotten chapel, isn't just a ghost. He's our reminder, a mirror, an etch of every time we need what didn't fit, what made us uncomfortable. What didn't to match the rites of faith or the measurements of science. San Cristóbal isn't about a village. It's about what happens when a life is rejected by heaven, by earth, and by time itself. The crying endures because it doesn't belong to him alone. It's the sound of everything left between worlds, between rituals, between names. Adinid baptismismo rethanalostrite. It's a zeal left open, a door never opened, and that door is a wall. Physically real, spiritually wet. It weeps not from pain, but from waiting. Without a name, the child became a symbol of what religion couldn't explain, what science couldn't measure, what people whisper but never say. In that space, he grew, not in body, but in memory, insolence, in ritual. The crying became its own language, not seeking comfort, just presence. Tosome, the Wallison inverted altar, a place of reversed worship where silence replaces shims, where water replaces wine, where stale bread replaces the host. It's not rejection of faith, but a shift. In San Cristóbal, belief wasn't lost, control over belief was. And when faith escapes ritual, it spreads through crying, through walls, through life. Some say it's all myth, rural exaggeration, collective fantasy. But even skeptics grow quiet when they hear a baby cry at night. Some truths don't need proof. They only need Tobe, and thy own is. It lingers, shaping how people breathe, how they sleep, how they dream. To the elders, the child behind, the Wallace guilt unclaimed, not just from those who yelled him, but from everyone who's ever ignored a life needing a name, a voice, a touch. That's why the story hurts, because it mirrors our absences, our cutties. He isn't just victim, his reflection, and like all reflections, he shows what we've hidden in ourselves. The fear is not death, it's erasure. The terror of never having existed, of being unheard, unnamed, unfelt. The crying is resistance. It doesn't want consolation, it wants witness. As long as the stones vibrate with his voice, he remains, and in this age of data, noise, and artificial minds, it's the sound of a crying child that still pierces the deepest, because it's not just sound, it's memory, it's the first noise we make in life. And often, the last we hear. The wall still stands, so does the chapel, and the village, though off the maps, still breathes. Some believe if the crying ever stops, something worse will begin. Others believe that will mean forgiveness. Noon knows. What we know is this: each time the southern wind blows, a candle goes out, and someone somewhere had listens. The child without a name is the blind spot of humanity. Theo Nuidni, because it hurts, but that always returns in voice, in wind, in damp stone. He doesn't want revenge or sainthood or even heaven. He wants to exist, to be seen, to be aimed, to be held by the hand that once raised the crow SS, but never raised him. And perhaps that's why the wall still cries. If this story sent chills down your spine, comment below where you're watching from, leave a like to support the channel, and share this